Good morning. We are the panel that's going to be talking about life after 280E. We have a lot to get through today. I thought it would make sense for us to introduce ourselves a little bit. I'm going to introduce myself, then the panel will introduce themselves. So I'm David Feuerstein, one of the co-founders and partner at Feuerstein Kulik. We've been in business since 2016 with offices in New York and California. That means I've been structuring transactions for the last 9 years to avoid 280E. So the idea with 280E going away is somewhat worrisome for the business of law, but actually good for you guys. So we're happy about that. I'd also like to say one quick thing. Lori and I, we found out, are both former athletes. We're not superstitious, we are stitious. And so talking about 280E going away when it's still here is a little unnerving. So for any of you who want to say something to yourselves quickly to make sure that we're not cursing the rescheduling, please do that now. But with that, I'll pass the mic to Lori to introduce herself.
Okay, thank you. Lori Holcomb. I'm the founder and CEO of Gold Flora. Gold Flora is a vertically integrated cannabis company in California. We're a single state operator. We cultivate, manufacture, distribute, have retail stores, and I believe this month have a brand that just ranked number 11 in the state of California. So proud about that.
Hi, I'm Peter Sack. I'm managing partner of Chicago Atlantic. We're a lending company to the cannabis industry. We've deployed close to $2 billion, generally in limited license jurisdictions across the U.S. over the last 6 years.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mackenzie Peterson. I'm the VP of Marketing at Advisor Shares. We're an active ETF shop, but in the context of Benzinga, we are the largest cannabis asset manager across 3 ETFs, MSOS, YOLO, and MSOX.
Good morning, Darren Weiss, president of Verano. Like Lori's company, we are a multi-state operator of cannabis facilities. We cultivate, manufacture, distribute, and sell products across 15 markets. We have 150 plus retail doors, and we are excited about what's coming over these next couple of months.
Great. Let's start. We'll go in reverse order. We'll start with you, Darren. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are, sort of the likelihood of rescheduling just generally in 2024 or 25, and then put your chips down. Where do you think, or when do you think it's going to happen?
Yeah, so in terms of 2024, the likelihood is 0. In 2025, I feel very good about where things stand. I know, and I heard, the keynote. There's angst and upset about, seemingly how long this has taken. But the fact is that this has been sort of record speed. It's frustrating to those in the industry because a lot of the information and evidence relied upon is not new. But I think the administrative agencies have done their job and papered the record appropriately. So I feel very, very strongly about the rescheduling effort. As for timing, I really am not going to make a prediction. It's going to be at some point in 2025 or 2026. I'm hoping for early 2025, but these things have a way of getting delayed, so we'll see.
Just so everyone understands, we've given the panelists the questions ahead of time. It's a fair, all these questions are fair. No one's being treated unfairly here. Right, so Mackenzie, how about you? What do you think?
That's true. I think the only right answer, which is what you were saying, is not 2024. Anytime after that, I think seems very plausible. I think, you want to look at things that are happening in terms of will it happen. More than half of Americans live in a state where there's legal programs. We saw the DEA comment period. We saw a ton of comments come in, a ton of positive comments come in. Both of the presidential picks this time around seem to be at least pro-cannabis, or at least the most pro-cannabis that we've seen historically. So in terms of it actually happening, seems like a lot of good things lining up. When? Such a tough question, and I'm not exactly sure, but not 2024, I think is my only answer there.
Come on, Peter, you have a date for us?
Yeah, March 31st.
Perfect.
Trump's endorsement of rescheduling was a major milestone to have the Republican candidate endorse rescheduling. I think, for me at least, changed the dynamic and conversation to be a when, not if, regardless of administration.
Lori?
Okay, so I don't bet on college sports and I don't bet on politicians, but I'm going to agree with Peter. I think once Trump came out, no matter who's elected, and I don't like having it be in one side's hands or the other hands, but 75% approval rating in the United States for cannabis, it's about time. So I think it's got to pass, and hopefully I'm in agreement either Q1 or Q2 of 25.
Great. Peter, why don't we start with you on this one. What do you think is one significant change, only one, that your business is going to experience if cannabis is rescheduled and 280E goes away?
As a lender, the ability to service indebtedness is a key factor in our underwriting. And with 280E going away, it effectively increases the cash flow after tax for our businesses and our clients by 50 to 100% in some cases. And so that increases their ability to service indebtedness significantly and makes us more willing to provide capital to the industry. And I think that same decision tree that we make internally, lots of investment firms across the capital structure are making as well.
Mackenzie, on the equity side, what do you one change you'll see in your business?
I feel like it's one of those things where the companies will benefit just by having more money on their balance sheets. That can go into a ton of different places, but I also think with 280 going away, that normally is going to be paired with rescheduling, which from sort of a normalization perspective, from an investor interest perspective, that's where the key is, I think, for us.
Darren, how about you?
Well, first of all, Peter, you didn't say that you were going to lower our rates, so that that's an important part here. Less risk, better cash flow. Look, I think big picture, the biggest change is going to be the opportunity for companies like Verano, given the fact that there will be additional cash coming to the bottom line, to be able to and be confident in making decisions that are based on long-term value and not the short-term cash flow needs. It's very difficult in this industry, as everyone certainly on this stage knows, to generate a tremendous amount of free cash given this absurd tax structure. And so, the ability to be treated like a normal business, even if only for purposes of tax, is a major milestone, both in terms of sort of the overall momentum, as the other panelists have talked about, for liberalization of cannabis policy, but also just sort of the decision-making architecture that companies like ours face. So that's what's super exciting, and that's what we're focused on.
I'm going to put you on the spot for a second.
Sure.
What do you think about companies using this free cash flow for more R&D as opposed to, say, growth capital?
Yeah, so a couple of things on that. First of all, most of the big companies, don't know necessarily about all the privates, but most of the big companies aren't paying 280E right now. So they will not necessarily see additional dollars coming. For companies like Verano who are paying 280E taxes, even if in arrears, you are going to see, of course, some significant additional dollars. And this is one of the things that's so exciting, that R&D, as we all know, has really been stifled for lots of different reasons, one of them being cash. And so the opportunity to engage in more sort of hard science R&D, which has not been the bulwark of this industry, I think there's a tremendous amount of white space there. And that's certainly something that we're focusing on either way, but this will free up resources to do so.
Lori, I'd like to give you a chance. What's one sort of significant change you'll see in your business with the disappearance of 280E?
Well, I feel bad for any accountant out there because we pay a lot of money. So I think to Darren's point, just the taxes and the way that you have to, who's paying what and what payroll, and we're vertical so we can push things around, which makes it a little bit easier, but free cash flow, freeing up some cash for the balance sheet, and obviously, getting a simpler structure for taxes. I mean, people that don't adhere to 280E in other businesses don't even understand the complexities. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, as I said sort of jokingly at the outset, our firm since 2016 has structured every transaction with 280E in mind. The amount of entities to create for a simple business that you would never do in a normal, a normal business, a widget company, for example, that doesn't exist in cannabis. So I think from our perspective, it's a breath of fresh air to be able to really, do corporate transactions in the way they're supposed to be done and not in the way to avoid an antiquated tax. Mackenzie, you haven't started any of these conversations, so we'll put you on the spot. What's one significant change you see in the industry as a whole, forgetting just your business, but as a whole?
I definitely think it does tie into that sort of general normalization component, just like operating like a normal business, being seen, I think, as a business that's operating in the cannabis industry rather than a cannabis business necessarily. I think just the simplicity and ability to run like a normal business is super important. And I think when investors are looking at it, I think it's sort of finding what they're used to looking at in terms of like a more normal company and being able to kind of connect the dots and see it as an opportunity. I think it's generally the idea.
Peter, what about you? What do you think one item that you're going to see in the industry as a whole that's going to change?
I think it's an incremental puzzle piece that leading to what I think will be really transformational of uplisting. That it's sort of in addition to something like safe banking, it's one step on the way there, and we'll take every step we can get.
How about you, Lori?
Well, certainly for California, consolidation and M&A. And I think we talked about this briefly. There's a lot of companies that you may not be able to acquire because they haven't adhered to 280E. So if you do a look back, are you able to acquire some of those assets, right? Because right now it would be a liability, and that's where a lawyer would come in. But how is that going to be viewed moving forward? Can we acquire some of those assets that did not account for 280E because they were smaller mom and pop companies, not take that liability and see actually some big consolidation in a big market?
Darren, what about you? What do you see as the one major change in the industry once you get rid of 280E?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about the sort of change in decision-making architecture. I think there's going to be, on a less interesting note, some balance sheet cleanup. So folks that have got significant liability sitting on their books will have an opportunity to pay down debt, to pay accrued tax liabilities, things like that. I think there's going to be, to Mackenzie's point, there's going to be some interesting noise in the capital markets and an ability for companies who are publicly traded to be able to use their equity again. But I think that the most significant thing really is going to be the ability of companies to, as you said, just like the way that you structure transactions, the way that we think about the business is also colored by this absurd tax structure. And so the ability to make investments, longer term investments, is super important. Some of the what we see around pricing and promotional strategy, again, a lot of that is driven by the need for small operators especially to generate cash. And so on that note, I think you're also going to see additional opportunities for more equitable distribution. You're going to be able to be a single state operator or a single store operator and be able to make money and survive, whereas today it's almost impossible.
So leads to another question, which is, do we think that the eradication of 280E and sort of the additional free cash flow is going to trickle down to all companies such that all companies can be successful? Or do we think that's really only going to benefit the companies that are most set up to succeed?
I'll jump in. I think it's one of those things where it benefits everyone kind of generally. I think it does benefit not better companies more, but I think companies that have been most burdened, obviously, by 280E. So I see companies that are really able to take that additional cash and really push it further as the ones that benefit the most. But I think ultimately, rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing on that.
Yeah, I know you're a baseball guy, right? So before you go up to bat, you generally have either sort of a donut that goes on the bat, or you swing with a couple of bats at the same time. You do things that are a little harder than are normal, so that when you do go up to bat, your swing could be faster, you can hit harder, etc. I think that companies that have been successful operating in this space, in an environment that is more difficult, to change analogies, sort of with your hands tied behind your back, once those handcuffs come off, once we get rid of the extra bat, we can really swing a whole lot harder. And so in that vein, I think it does really help the larger operators. But I do think that there is an opportunity that really doesn't exist today in a meaningful way for smaller operators to succeed over the longer term.
So Peter, as the capital provider on the stage, How do you feel about this sort of idea that these smaller companies may now have balance sheets that are acceptable to lend to? Is that enough for you, or do you need more than just simply looking at the financials of the company?
It's a huge change, and I would push back a little bit that bigger companies benefit more than smaller companies, if only because big companies are more likely to be vertically integrated, and so they've found more ability to push costs into their cost of goods sold and mitigate the impact of 280E, whereas pure dispensary operators have less flexibility to do that. And so I think it's going to highlight the relative importance of having lots of retail, whereas previously you wanted to be vertically integrated to optimize tax. That benefit of being vertically integrated goes away. And so particularly for retail, I think it makes it a lot easier to finance smaller companies than it was before.
So Lori, you're from California and probably can appreciate this more than most people on the stage, although New Yorkers appreciate this. What does the disappearance of 280E do for the illicit market?
Oh, the illicit. We're going right there.
Come on, we've
Yeah.
only got 11 more minutes, so let's get right to it.
Well, I think two things. So right now, there's a disparity in the illicit market in California in pricing due to our tax structure. So local taxes, the state tax, and then you have 280E. It's insane. And then when you talk about the equity side, right, I know your debt, but when you explain to someone who's not in cannabis that you have to go up to Canada to raise money to bring it back here because we're a Canadian listed company, and then the Canadian companies can be on a US exchange with the volume, it's insanity. So something's got to give on the equity side. Money has to come into the market, and we have to be able to offer pricing to the consumer at the same price as the illicit market to be on stable ground, because right now it's an unfair competitive advantage.
And do you think, and anyone can jump in on this, but do you think just simply the price differential, meeting the illicit market at the price, is enough to start pushing the illicit market out?
No. So I just, consumers are going to go to whoever's been growing for them. It's a habit. But we need more retail stores in California. We only have about 1,000. We need 3,000. So it starts with that. And then I think when there's more access, then at that point, we'll start seeing pricing change.
Anyone else want to take a stab at the illicit market? Everybody hands off on that. All right. Lively panel today, folks. Assume for the moment that actually 280E, rescheduling happens, 280E goes away. Peter's already jumped in and said he thinks the next, is safe banking or an uplisting. What else would be what's the next shoe to drop on a federal level, and what's the timing and horizon on that?
Yeah, so it's very difficult to make predictions around legislation, especially when it comes to cannabis, because cannabis, for whatever reason, always gets sort of put on the back burner whenever anything else comes up that is more pressing to the political moment. But I am a big believer in momentum as it relates to cannabis and the liberalization of cannabis laws, and we have a lot going for us. There is obviously, as Lori pointed out, we've got tremendous support from the general population for cannabis reform. And as more states legalize, as more states move to adult use, as we see more ubiquity across the key markets, this is going to be even more sort of part of folks' communities across the country, and there will be a real or a larger groundswell, in my view, over time to push sort of the political envelope. So I do think that you're going to see movements in Congress. But, if for anyone who's listened to the last panel, that's not really the only option that we have. There are options to push with respect to the courts, which, some of that does focus on 280E, but a lot of it is also just about the opportunities to operate as a legal business beyond just the tax code. So that's significant. I think that there's going to be an opportunity as this momentum develops to be able to access U.S. exchanges. And again, I think depending upon who's president, come January of next year or February of next year, the calculus may change a little bit. But it's getting increasingly difficult to ignore some of these inequities that Lori spoke of. and the absurdities with respect to U.S. companies with U.S. businesses and U.S. employees going to Canada, which, no offense to the Canadians, but, that's just not, there isn't really a nexus there. So, I do think that the momentum that rescheduling brings is significant, and we don't think it ends with rescheduling or 280E going away.
So, so is it safe? Is it legalization? Is it uplisting? Does the boy suit get heard first? What's the next shoe to drop?
So I can speak to the Commerce Clause litigation. We're hoping to get to the Supreme Court next year, and possible by next fall we have a decision in that case. Everything else, I think, is up in the air, depending upon where Congress settles and the executive branch as well.
Mackenzie, what about you?
I will be surprised that you said safe because it feels like saying Macbeth at a theater. It feels like a very scary thing to say. I don't know ultimately which catalyst pushes us forward, kind of like you were saying it, but there's a sense of momentum and things changing, and it's way overdue. So I'm not sure which specific catalyst comes, but I think one pushes the other, which pushes the other. So I think it's just one of those things where they'll continue to mount, and hopefully it'll be something exciting next after schedule.
Peter?
I hope for safe and uplisting. I think those are some of the most dramatic sort of flip the light switch moments that can have huge impacts on our industry and impact the industry really, really quickly.
Lori?
Well, I'm just going to say, if those two things happen, right, we get rescheduling, we get a safer banking, access to more capital, it's phenomenal the amount of people in California that I meet that have made a living off of the plant and off of cannabis. We've operated under Prop 215, a different movement, since 1998. And I think for those guys, the smaller ones, it'll give them an opportunity, to Darren's point, to actually make money where it's really difficult today. So they're forced to stay in the illicit market, and that's really unfair. So I'm hoping that it literally impacts a lot of people, not just the bigger companies, in a meaningful way.
Darren, do you think, just sort of one last question, and then we can open it up to any questions from the audience, but do you think with the disappearance of 280E that Verano and other MSOs are going to start focusing more on retail and be less concerned about being vertical in each state?
No. And the reason for that is, if you look at the trajectory of the industry, what you see is a proliferation of retail doors, even in markets that are limited license. And so the opportunity still on the wholesale side continues to be greater. I think, Peter, you're right in the sense that being a dispensary operator, single dispensary, handful of dispensaries, is now possibly more profitable after 280E goes away. But let's not forget that you still, as a vertically integrated operator, have the opportunity to retain more of that margin if you can push more of your product through your own stores. So I guess the short answer to your question is no. I don't think there's going to be necessarily a shift of focus to or back to retail. But I do think that it does change the retail dynamics to the extent that multi-states want to just operate retail stores in a market.
Well, if I could push back for a second,
Sure.
I would say if you think that rescheduling is going to sort of be the first of many things to happen on the federal level, and that ultimately you get federal legalization, and then who knows, in our lifetime, interstate commerce, is it necessary then at that point to be vertically integrated in each state? And is there a strategy perhaps to say, well, I should have stores in many states, but really I can be vertical in only some of those states?
Right, yeah, no. So to the extent that there's interstate commerce, it makes absolutely no sense to be vertically integrated in every market. It's one of these absurdities of the industry that we operate. We don't get the benefits of economies of scale. No one would create a business and set it up this way. No one who knows what they're doing. So yeah, I mean, in that sense, for sure, there's no vertical integration as it relates to producing in every single market. The ability to obtain those economies of scale is significant. But to be clear, rescheduling does not create interstate commerce. And so that is, I think, a little further afield at this point.
So, and Peter, I'll sort of ask the question to you from a different view. as somebody who is providing capital to potentially people who are building out cultivation facilities, are you going to be more hesitant to do that, seeing that 280E has gone away and perhaps there is going to be federal legalization that would perhaps, lessen their ability to sell their product and pay your loan back?
I think the same principles still apply, that whether we're speaking with wholesalers or retailers, we're looking for people that can carve out a competitive niche that's going to be viable over the long term and be defensible over the long term. And on the cultivation and wholesale side, that means the best products and the best brands that can really differentiate in whatever segment that is. And that'll apply 280 or no 280.
Lori?
Yeah, so I think for us in 2016 and 17, when I founded Gold Flora, one of my goals was to become the largest indoor cultivator in the state of California. We've got today 160,000 square feet of canopy. We're one of the largest indoor cultivators. I don't think anybody, including Darren's, going to go raise money to come compete in California to start an indoor grow when I already have one. So it sort of solidifies, if you become a market leader early on in your markets that are limited licenses, you get that grow. And if we get interstate at some point, I'm with you when, that's a long time out, I don't look at that, it would be great, but we're happy with our position right now in California.
Mackenzie, I'll give you the last word and then we'll open it up to the questions to the floor.
I don't know, but your thing did remind me a little bit in terms of Kamala's comment recently on going for full legalization and how that would potentially impact interstate commerce. That would be super interesting. Again, that feels very, very far in terms of possibility and what could actually happen there. But ultimately, I don't have that much to weigh in on that aspect of kind of the business.
Great. So we have like about 60 seconds plus or minus. If anyone has a question, yeah, in the front here. Dad.
Just real quick, first of all, thank Peter for your investment in the industry. But there is a growing conversation in Chicago about why Chicago Atlantic chose to invest in New York versus Chicago, given the name of Chicago Atlantic. Is it the political landscape in Illinois that runs you guys away from this market? And what could social equity license holders like myself do to attract you back, Chicago Atlantic to Chicago?
I'll jump in quickly because the political climate in New York is no better than any state anywhere else. So it's definitely not the politics, I promise.
Yeah, the difference with New York is New York took an extremely different approach to prioritizing social equity in its market, stronger than any other state has and more directed than any other state. And it's pretty remarkable that they gave first priority to justice-involved individuals, issued more than 500 licenses, retail licenses, before anyone else, and then they set up money to back their funding. And now there's been a ton of execution errors in the meantime, but that vision and that ambition is really unique. And I've spoken to regulators in a number of states that would love to do something like that, including Illinois, and the political will simply isn't there. Sadly.
Unfortunately, we are out of time, but I'm sure I speak for all the panelists to say we'll be around. We're happy to talk about any of these issues, some other issues. So look forward to talking to everybody later today and this evening. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.